3 times he offered himself to the British as a spy. 3 times they turned him away. So he went to the enemy instead and became the most trusted spy the Germans had. They never suspected that every word he sent them was a lie, or that those lies would help save D-Day. By 1944, Hitler knew an invasion was coming. The only questions were where and when. Along the coast of occupied France stood the Atlantic Wall, and behind it, the divisions that could throw any landing back into the sea. If the Germans guessed the place and massed their reserves in time, the invasion would die on the beaches. So the Allies set out to make them guess wrong. His name was Juan Pujol García, born in Barcelona in 1912. He had come through the Spanish Civil War with a deep loathing of fascism, and when the wider war began, he decided he wanted to help the Allies. He went to the British in Madrid and offered himself as a spy. 3 times he asked. 3 times they turned him down. So he took an extraordinary gamble. If the British would not have him, he would make himself useful another way. He approached the Germans instead, posing as a fanatical Nazi sympathizer, and offered to spy on Britain for them. They accepted. They trained him in secret writing and sent him to England. He never went. He settled in Lisbon and began to invent the war. Armed with a tourist guidebook and a reference book on the Royal Navy, he wrote long, convincing reports about a country he had never set foot in. He invented a whole network of sub-agents feeding him secrets, and the Germans believed every word. Even when he slipped, reporting that men in Glasgow would do anything for a liter of wine, his handlers, who knew even less about Britain than he did, never noticed. The one-man act couldn't last. In early 1942, an American officer in Lisbon heard of him and tipped off the British. Suddenly, the spy they had rejected was one they could not afford to lose, because a German agent the Germans trusted absolutely was worth more than any army. They brought him to London, gave him a case officer named Thomas Harris and a code name, Garbo, after Greta Garbo, because they judged him the best actor in the world. Garbo was now one piece of something vast. The Allies were building a deception called Operation Fortitude, an entire fictional army, the first United States Army group, supposedly massing in southeast England under the famous General Patton. There were inflatable tanks and dummy landing craft in the fields of Kent, but they were almost beside the point. The Germans could barely fly reconnaissance over England. What they knew, they learned from spies, and their most trusted spy answered to London. Garbo's task was to point the Germans at a single answer. The shortest crossing of the Channel led to the Pas de Calais, and it was exactly where Hitler already expected the blow to fall. So message after message, Garbo and his phantom army fed that conviction until the German command was certain. When the invasion came, it would strike at Calais. Normandy, far to the west, was the coast no one was truly watching. And then, on the 6th of June, it came, at Normandy. 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. The largest seaborne invasion ever attempted struck the one stretch of coast the Germans had been trained to ignore. The landings held, but a beachhead is a fragile thing. If the Germans now rushed their reserves west, they could still drive the Allies back into the sea. 3 days later came the message that mattered most. Normandy, Garbo warned his German handlers, was a feint, a diversion meant to pull their strength away from the true target, which was still Calais. The Phantom Army, he noted, had not even moved. It was a lie, delivered by the one man they believed without question. And it worked. The German command held its powerful 15th Army at the Pas de Calais, 2 armored and 19 infantry divisions, braced for an attack that was never going to come. For weeks, those divisions stood idle, while the Allies poured men and machines into Normandy. By the time Berlin accepted, there was no second invasion. The beachhead had become a front, and the front had begun to move. The deception had bought the rarest commodity in war: time. Churchill had said it the year before to Stalin, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." Garbo was that bodyguard made flesh, and the high command of the Reich never once saw his face. Garbo did not win D-Day alone. No one could have. The deception was a machine. Codebreakers reading Germany's own signals, other double agents, fake radio traffic, command of the skies, and the Germans were already half-minded to believe him. But of all the threads in that web, his was the brightest, the performer who made the whole lie live and breathe. Never suspecting a thing, the Germans gave him the Iron Cross on Hitler's personal order. Months later, in secret, Britain made him a member of the Order of the British Empire, perhaps the only man in the entire war honored by both sides at once. When the war ended, Garbo feared Nazi revenge, so he faked his own death and vanished into South America, where he lived in near-total obscurity for almost 40 years. The man who had commanded an army that never existed and helped save the largest one that ever did, simply disappeared. This is unwritten history, the stories the world chose to forget.